It seems that now the weather's gotten nice and I'm outside, and Grammy and I have actually started camping again. We went camping this week, and we're going to go camping again next week. That I'm slowing down on a book, but I'm not going to forget the book. We have a half a chapter to go, and Caleb and Trey have found the town where the broken rope is located. And they met Lacode, or Lacoud, and Caleb has looked at the broken rope, and he immediately knew why it broke. But you would think that he got busy to fix the rope right away. No, not quite. Many things are going to happen before he gets a chance to fix the rope. So, we best continue here and see what's going to go on. But first of all, alright, I haven't got any answers to the riddles before, so I'm returning all the prizes to Amazon, and the car dealers and the electronic stores and the now I'm in touch with a realtor, and there's a rooftop condo for sale in the Third Ward on Water Street that overlooks the river, and it comes with its own slip for a boat, a speedboat, and this just could turn out to be one of the prizes for a riddle. So I would get busy and answer one of these riddles, because you never know what the prize could be. All right. What has to be broken before you use it? What has to be broken before you use it? That's not very hard, is it? Okay. So, sip of apple juice today. Does apple juice look like a urine sample? Well, okay. Let's go on here. When I started reading this book, I was using coffee, but I haven't drank coffee for weeks. So I guess it's one of the things of the quarantine. I stopped drinking coffee. But that's okay. All right. No pictures. This book comes without pictures. The only pictures that are in this book are in your mind. So they're in the middle of the jungle in Chiapas. They have met Lacode. Lacode is going to go grab his turkey that he shot, and he's been hanging in a branch for a few days. So Lacode said the turkey should be just prime by now. Oh, I imagine that turkey is prime. It's probably rotten to all get out. But he goes get some turkey because he's going to make dinner. Lacode's own quarters, halfway up the mountain, consisted of two old U.S. Army squad tents. In one he lived, ate, and slept. In the other was what he called his metallurgical laboratory. Trey peeked into it as they passed. It was completely filled by two big tables. On one stood a dented, tarnished, much-used microscope, sheaves of paper and notebooks, and a clutter of rock samples. The other held rows of cardboard canisters and stoppered glass jars full of chemicals, a few Bunsen burners, retorts, laboratory dishes, and racks of test tubes. They sat down at the table in the living room, and while an aged Kamateco crone fried and served the turkey, Lacode told them something about his project here. He had been prospecting south of the border for a couple years, confident he would find his fortune somewhere in Mexico. Having heard of the zoo's reputation, he had slipped quietly and alone into this neighborhood, and here he had made his real find, the copper deposit. I'm only working the fringe of it, he said. This is no small isolated drift. There's a mountain of copper under the jungle. Why, there are streams here that are running pure blue. We crossed one, said Trey. We wondered about it. Full of copper sulfate, LeCode explained. Bright blue copper salts washed out from underground. I'm going to sneeze. Hi. Okay. That sneeze was not part of the book. That was an ad lib. And right now, he went on, the world was hungry for copper. What with the increasing use of electricity for lighting, for telegraphs, for telephones, and the increasing need of copper to conduct all that electricity. At the moment, Chile was the world's biggest producer. If the Chilean government ever got smart and nasty, it could jack copper prices so high that Chile would have a stranglehold on every other country. Sounds like oil today. But if Mexico became a copper producer too, Chile would have competition. Chile would not manipulate the market or threaten a copper shortage or make outrageous demands for its product, and a copper find would be the making of Mexico. The country would no longer be a poor relation of the family of nations. With a treasure in copper, Mexico could develop, become an industrial power, stand up right alongside the USA in progress and prosperity. And, said LeCode triumphantly, I found that treasure trove of copper. However, he added, if he was going to make any profit out of the discovery himself, he had to proceed with caution. He was not a Mexican, and it would be all too easy for President Diaz, if he got word of the find, to get rid of the gringo and claim the treasure for his own. He had done such things often enough before, and to his own fellow Mexicans. So LeCode had to walk on tiptoes, so to speak, while he tried to develop this operation on a financial shoestring. The river down yonder leads eventually to the Pacific coast. I got a Mexican part on the coast with a seagoing tugboat and a string of barges. I'll ship my ore down to them in cayucos. When he's got a full load, he'll tow it up to the California to sell to the smelters. We'll plow every cent back into the operation. Better machinery. More men. We'll dig more copper. Right now we're working the carbonated ore on the surface. But as we go deeper, we'll hit the sulfate ones, and they're harder to get at. We'll need steam shovels. Yep, steam shovels. We'll need steam drills. We'll need ore trains. But once we're working at full blast, we'll be so well entrenched and so prosperous that even old dictator Diaz won't dare to muscle in. If we can only hang on until then. Now you see why that rope is so almighty important. You said you're working on a shoestring, commented Caleb. Getting that rope in here must have cost you a pretty penny. The biggest hunk of my total investment. Nodded LeCode. Had it made and spliced to measure in San Francisco and shipped down from there. Mr. Crabtree gave a sniff, evidently contemptuous of any rope that did not come from Newton Rope Walk. It was dropped off at a little fishing village, Puerto Soconusco, on the Pacific. Took a 20-mule team to haul it in the wagon along a fairly good road, and from there to the city of Tapachula. Then I had to get it across the Sierra Madre, across the Central Plateau, across another heap of mountains, and then through the jungle to here. You know what that rope weighs? More than Grandpa. 17,950 pounds, said Caleb. On the nose, said LeCode, with a respectful glance at him. Lakey went on to say that he had hired, begged, and wheedled, was more like it, nearly 200 men from Tapachula. The rope had been brought here by their sheer manpower. dragging and pushing a cart that sometimes rode on wheels, sometimes on skids, sometimes on a raft. Then once they had got it here, it took all those men to lug it up the mountain, to lift it off the ground. Excuse me. And poet taught, when they looped it around the engine wheel at the riverside of the similar wheel, and at the ore loading platform at the top of the mountain, by the time they had done all that and cut lumber to build the ropes or hoppers, the poor sons of guns had gone back to Tapachula, either badly ruptured or with sprained backs and busted ribs. I owe those Tapachula men a lot. And I don't mean just for the muscle. I mean, if I had come here with just the workers I got now, the zoo would have slaughtered us. But me and my 200, we were an army. Every 10th man carrying a sidearm. He slapped the big revolver on his hip. The zoo weren't about to tango with an army. And they left us alone. Ever since, I reckon they think I still got that army on call. Maybe he would have to call them again, Lacoud asked, because when Caleb had re-spliced the rope, he didn't see how they could lift it again and stretch it again around the pulleys without a lot more manpower than he had at present. That will be my worry, said Caleb, standing up. I didn't splice a good rope just to leave it lying on the ground, especially after all you've told us. That rope's got to carry a lot of responsibility. It's time I went and did some diagnosing. I want to look at the splice that parted. Lacoud grinned as the little man left the tent. Then he turned to Trey and said, I noticed you taking a grand gander in my laboratory. Like to look it over for good? Little apple juice. Lacoud grinned as the little man left the tent. Okay. Okay, then he asked Trey to look at his laboratory, and so here's Trey's answer. Trey would and did. He peered through the microscope and magnified grains of rock, some speckled, some striped, some crystallized with snowflake patterns. Lacoud showed him sample chunks of various ones: green, malachite, blue, azurite, blue-green, crystal-cola, the very color bromite he was currently mining. And then there is this, he said, and handed Trey a test tube with about a half-inch of shining yellow powder at the bottom. For such a small content, the tube was unexpectedly heavy in Trey's hand. He stared at it and exclaimed, Lakey, this has got to be gold! You'll make a prospector yet, said Lacoud, beaming. Gold it is. Whoa. Wherever you find copper, you stand a good chance of finding a trace of gold mixed in with it, and a fair chance of finding a genuine load of gold not far off. Just that pinch in the test tube tells me there is a load somewhere in this region, and don't think I'll neglect it. As soon as I've got this operation running here, I'll start fanning out and looking for that vein of gold. It won't be as important as to the Republic of Mexico as a big copper find, but it'll sure mean a lot to Robert Lacoud. You bet. I wish you luck, said Trey. Well, if everything else fizzled, said Lacoud jokingly, I can always turn witch doctor. How's that? Boy, let's try some bee spray. Let's see if that works. A little honey spray. Maybe that'll stop the cough. And it sneezes. All these chemicals. He waved a hand at the table full of canisters, jars, and bottles. I've got the stuff to test any kind of terrain I might cross, for any kind of pay dirt that it might contain. But some of these chemicals have mumbo-jumbo properties. He reached for a gallon-sized glass jar full of thick, clear liquid in which were immersed large lumps of silvery white metal. Potassium, he said, pretty near the lightest and softest of all materials. Oh, no particular use by itself, but I make a solution of potassium ferrocyanide as a reagent for testing for copper. Drop a bit of dirt in the solution, and if it's got even a trace of copper, the liquid will turn brown. I'll be doggone, murmured Trey. The potassium has to be stored in petroleum. LeCoud went on as he reached into a jar and with a pair of tweezers and pinched off a silvery speck the size of a match head, because it reacts instantly to air or water. See? Shh. The speck had come out of the air dripping oil. Now that most of the oily coat had dripped away, it began to give off wisps of smoke. Now watch, said LeCoud, and dropped the speck into a shallow saucer of water. The speck of potassium immediately began to zigzag back and forth on the surface of the water, emitting a high hissing white punctuated by little popping noises and leaving a zigzag trail of thin white smoke. Then the surface of the water caught fire for a second, burning briefly with a flame colored like no fire Trey had ever seen before, a flame of lovely lilac hue. Remember this had happened, okay? Remember, the potassium burns when it goes into the water. Okay. The potassium liberates hydrogen gas from the water, explained Lakey, and then ignites it. The flame is colored by potassium vapor. The violet flame was only intermittent, flicking on and off, while a speck of metal continued its noisy jumping about on the surface of the water. Finally it slowed the whining and snapping, and finally now considered largely that it had been a spongy gray-white globule, balanced for just an instant atop the water's surface. Then it dropped underwater and made Trey jump, giving off a crack, like a shot of a small pistol. With that, it disintegrated into a gritty gray powder. Doggone, said Trey, much impressed by the little show. Does it stay hot? It reached to poke a finger into the water, but LeCoud stopped him. It won't burn you, but it can bite you, he said. The residue is potassium hydroxide. It's a powerful caustic. Enough of the stuff can eat the flesh right off your bones. Remember that too. Potassium hydroxide could take the flesh right off your bones. Before Trey could say again that he was doggone, they were interrupted by the entrance of a very somber-faced Caleb Crabtree. I'm sorry to tell you this, Lakey, he said in a grim voice. That's my grim voice, plucking at his fringe of whiskers. But that rope didn't part at the splice. And it didn't just break. It was filed all the way around. Not quite to the core, but deep enough that it was sure to snap. It was a moment before LeCoud could find his voice. I was wrong, he said huskily. The zoo haven't left us alone after all. This wasn't done with a machete, said Caleb dryly. And somehow I doubt that the zoo are equipped with a cross-cut rat-tail file. But somebody is, and somebody doesn't want that rope in the jungle. Lakey, can you think of any other enemies you might have? Before the stunned LeCoud could answer, they heard a cheery, "Hello!" from the clearing below. All three of them popped out of the tent to stare down the mountain at the blonde girl on the horseback. Well, that was the end of chapter 13. Chapter 14 comes next when I read you the next one. All right, bye-bye.